I stared at my parents across our family dinner table, fork halfway to my mouth. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. My mother had just casually asked if the money had helped with my recovery. I blinked, genuinely confused. "What money?" I asked. My sister Emily smirked, eyes darting to her plate. Mom touched my hand gently, saying, "You're stronger than we thought." Ricardo. Dad went completely silent, suddenly fascinated with his mashed potatoes. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Something was very wrong, and I was determined to find out what. 6 months ago, my life had been on a perfect trajectory. At 32, I had established myself as a respected architectural engineer at one of the top firms in Boston. I was saving for my dream home, a modern cabin-style house on a quiet lake about 40 miles outside the city. My girlfriend Allison and I had been together for 3 years, talking about marriage once I finished my professional certification. Everything was falling into place exactly as planned. Then came the accident. It was a rainy Tuesday evening in October. I was driving home from a client meeting when a delivery truck ran a red light and slammed into the driver's side of my car. I remember the squeal of brakes, the flash of headlights, and then nothing for nearly 2 days. I woke up in the hospital with 4 broken ribs, a shattered left femur, a broken collarbone, and what the doctors called a moderate traumatic brain injury. The first week was a blur of pain medication, surgeries, and worried faces hovering over my bed. My parents flew in from Arizona. My sister Emily, who lived just 20 minutes away from me, was there almost constantly. "You had us scared to death," Mom told me when I was finally lucid enough to understand what had happened. "The doctors weren't sure if you'd have permanent brain damage. Fortunately, most of my cognitive functions returned to normal within a few weeks. The only lingering effect was memory issues. I had gaps in my recollection of events around the accident, and I sometimes struggled with short-term memory. The doctors assured me this was normal and would likely improve with time. Physical recovery was another matter entirely. After being discharged from the hospital, I spent 2 months in a rehabilitation facility, learning to walk again and regaining strength in my left leg. The physical therapy was grueling. Some days I made progress. Other days the pain was so intense I wondered if I'd ever get back to normal. Through it all, my family was supportive in their own ways. My parents called daily from Arizona, where they had returned after my condition stabilized. Emily visited weekly, usually bringing food and handling paperwork for me. She owned a small accounting firm and had always been the financially savvy one in our family. "Let me take care of all this insurance nonsense," she insisted when stacks of medical bills started arriving. "You focus on getting better. I deal with this kind of bureaucracy every day." I gratefully accepted her help. The medical bills were astronomical, and navigating insurance claims while on heavy pain medication seemed impossible. Emily took copies of my insurance policy, my identification, and had me sign some authorization forms so she could speak to the insurance companies on my behalf. "The policy has good catastrophic coverage," she assured me, "and the truck driver was clearly at fault, so their insurance will have to pay too. It might take a while to sort out, but you should be covered for most of the expenses." I trusted her completely. Emily had always been the responsible one, the planner, while I was more of a dreamer. Growing up, she balanced her checkbook to the penny, while I was more likely to round up to the nearest dollar. It made perfect sense for her to handle the financial aftermath of my accident. By spring, I was back in my apartment, using a cane but able to care for myself. Allison had been supportive throughout my recovery, though I sensed some strain in our relationship. She had taken on a lot of caretaking responsibilities while also working full-time as a graphic designer. The accident had put our future plans on indefinite hold. "I'm just glad you're alive," she would say whenever I apologized for how my injuries had disrupted our lives. "Everything else we can figure out as we go." I had just started working part-time from home, easing back into my job with modified duties. Money was tight. My short-term disability insurance covered only 60% of my salary, and I was still waiting to hear about the final settlement from the accident. Emily assured me it was being processed, but insurance companies were notorious for dragging their feet on large claims. That brings me to that fateful family dinner. I had been making good progress in my recovery, so my parents decided to visit for a long weekend to to see for themselves how I was doing. Emily offered to host a family dinner at her house. Throughout the evening, I noticed odd glances between my sister and parents, moments of unspoken communication that excluded me. Then came that question that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family. After dinner, I couldn't shake the strange reaction to my confusion about the money. On the drive home, Allison asked what was bothering me. I don't know, I admitted. But something feels off. Why would they ask about money that I never received? That night, while Allison slept, I dug through my files looking for insurance documents. I found copies of claim forms, medical bills, and correspondence with the insurance company, but nothing about a settlement. Finally, buried in a folder labeled Accident MISC, I found a carbon copy of a settlement notice from 3 months ago. According to this document, the insurance company had approved a payment of $175,000 to cover my medical expenses, rehabilitation costs, and lost wages. $175,000. Money I had never seen. I checked my bank statements. There was no deposit for any amount close to that sum. I felt a chill run through me as I realized what might have happened. But I needed proof before I jumped to any conclusions. I decided to start digging deeper into my finances, beginning with a call to the insurance company first thing in the morning. The customer service representative at the insurance company sounded bored until I explained my situation. "You're saying you never received the settlement check?" she asked, her tone suddenly alert. "That's correct," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have a copy of a settlement notice, but no record of receiving the actual funds." "One moment, please." The line went quiet except for the sound of typing. After what seemed like an eternity, she returned. "Mr. Alvarez, our records show the check was issued on February 12th and was cashed 2 days later. I can send you a copy of the endorsed check, if that would help." My stomach tightened. "Yes, please email that to me right away." While waiting for the email, I searched through more of my papers. I found a document I had signed giving Emily limited power of attorney during my hospitalization. It authorized her to make certain financial decisions on my behalf, but it had a clear expiration date of January 15th. The settlement check had been issued almost a month after that authority expired. When the insurance company's email arrived, I opened the attachment with trembling hands. There was the check, made out to me for $175,000. And there at the bottom was a signature that looked like mine, but with subtle differences. Someone had endorsed that check in my name, and I had a sinking feeling. I knew exactly who it was. I needed more evidence. I drove to my bank and requested 6 months of complete statements and copies of all signed documents from that period. The bank manager seemed reluctant until I explained that I suspected financial fraud. "This happens more often than people realize," he said sympathetically. "Unfortunately, family members are frequently the perpetrators." I left with a thick envelope of documents and a growing sense of betrayal. Back at my apartment, I spread everything out on my kitchen table. The picture that emerged was damning. Someone had opened a joint account in both my name and Emily's 2 days after my accident. The limited power of attorney would have given her the authority to do this. Then, once the settlement check arrived, it was deposited into this joint account. Over the next several weeks, the money was systematically transferred out in amounts ranging from $5,000 to $20,000. By April, the account was nearly empty except for $3,000. I had never even known it existed. My regular checking account showed no unusual deposits, just my reduced disability payments going in and bill payments going out. No wonder I had been struggling financially while trying to cover my remaining medical expenses. I sat back, feeling physically ill. My own sister had stolen my insurance settlement. But why? Emily was successful in her own right. Her accounting business served several prominent local clients, and she lived comfortably in a nice neighborhood. What would drive her to steal from me when I was at my most vulnerable? I decided to approach the situation carefully. That evening, I called Emily and asked if she could help me understand my current financial situation. "I'm trying to create a budget now that I'm back to work part-time," I explained. "But I'm confused about some of the insurance payments and medical bills." "Oh, You don't need to worry about all that right now, she said dismissively. Focus on your recovery. I told you I'd handle the paperwork. I appreciate that, but I'd like to understand where things stand. The medical bills keep coming, and I'm having trouble keeping up with them. Did the insurance settlement come through yet? There was a pause on the line. Ricardo, you know how these things work. It could take a year or more for everything to be settled. Insurance companies don't just hand over money quickly, especially for complicated cases like yours. Her lie was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I doubted my own evidence. So no settlement has been issued yet? I pressed. Nothing significant, she said vaguely. There have been some partial payments for specific medical procedures, but those went directly to the providers. Listen, I'm really busy with tax season right now. Can we discuss this another time? Maybe next week when things calm down at work? Sure, I said, trying to sound casual. No rush. By the way, I noticed you got a new car. That Tesla SUV looked pretty impressive when we were at your house for dinner. Oh, that, she laughed. Leased it for the business. Great tax write-off, and it impresses clients. Anyway, I need to run. Talk soon. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Emily had not only lied about the settlement, but was flaunting her new luxury vehicle purchased around the same time my money disappeared. Something else caught my attention too. During our parents' visit, Emily had proudly shown off her newly renovated kitchen with high-end appliances and custom cabinetry. She had mentioned the renovation cost nearly $40,000. The timing aligned perfectly with my missing settlement. The next day, I called my parents, being careful not to reveal my suspicions yet. Mom, I'm trying to get a handle on my finances after the accident. Emily's been helping, but I'm a bit confused about the insurance settlement. Has she mentioned anything to you about it? My mother hesitated. Well, she said something about the money being tied up in some kind of special account for your medical expenses. I don't really understand all that financial jargon. So you know there was a settlement? I asked pointedly. Another pause. Ricardo, Emily said you might be confused about some things because of your head injury. The doctors did say your memory might be affected. I think you should trust your sister on this. She knows what she's doing. The conversation continued in this frustrating vein. My parents clearly knew something about the money but were deferring to Emily's explanation. By the time I hung up, my suspicions had grown even stronger. Not only had Emily stolen from me, but she had also convinced our parents that I couldn't be trusted with my own finances due to my injury. That evening, I used Emily's email address and the password she had always used since college to access her personal email. I knew it was legally questionable, but I needed to know the truth. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There were multiple emails between Emily and our parents, discussing Ricardo's money and how to manage his expectations while he recovered. In one particularly revealing exchange from February, Emily wrote, "The settlement came through today. I've deposited it in the special account we discussed. Ricardo doesn't need to know everything right now while he's still dealing with his recovery. The doctors said stress could set back his progress, so it's better this way." My father had replied, "As long as the money is being used for his benefit, I suppose it's fine. But eventually, he'll need to know." My mother's response chilled me. Emily knows what's best. Ricardo has always been impulsive with money. This way, everything will be properly managed. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking with anger and betrayal. My entire family had conspired to keep my settlement money from me, under the guise of protecting me. But the new car, the kitchen renovation, and who knew what else suggested the money wasn't being protected at all. It was being spent. I needed professional help. This went beyond family disagreement into potential criminal territory. I decided to hire a private financial investigator to uncover the full extent of what had happened to my money. The financial investigator, a retired fraud detective named Marcus Winters, took less than a week to compile a devastating report. What he uncovered went far beyond what I had initially suspected. "Your sister didn't just take your insurance settlement," Marcus explained grimly as we sat in his small office. "She used your personal information to open multiple credit accounts and take out loans in your name." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were applications for 2 credit cards, a personal loan for $30,000, and a line of credit for $25,000, all in my name, but with email addresses and phone numbers that belong to Emily. How bad is it? I asked, feeling numb. The total fraud amounts to approximately $280,000, he said. That includes the settlement money, the loan, the credit line, and about $30,000 in credit card charges. I struggled to breathe. This was so much worse than I had imagined. But why? Emily makes good money with her accounting business. Why would she need to steal from me? Marcus leaned forward. That's the other thing. Her business isn't doing as well as she portrays. I found multiple tax liens and collection actions against her company. She's been operating in the red for at least 2 years. That doesn't make sense, I protested. She has a beautiful house, expensive car, just renovated her kitchen. All financed with debt, and apparently, your money, Marcus explained. Some people maintain the appearance of success at all costs. But there's something else you should know. He hesitated. I found evidence that your sister has a gambling problem. There are regular large withdrawals from her accounts at casinos within driving distance, plus numerous transactions with online gambling sites. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Emily, a gambling addict? The responsible one? The financial expert in the family? It seemed impossible. Yet, it would explain the desperate need for cash. What about my parents? I asked. Were they involved in the fraud? Marcus shook his head. Not directly in the credit fraud, no. But they did receive a wire transfer of $25,000 from your sister in February, labeled as a gift. The timing coincides with when she received your settlement money. So, my parents had benefited from Emily's theft, whether they fully understood the source of the money or not. The betrayal cut deeper with each new revelation. What do I do now? I asked, feeling lost. You have options, Marcus said. You can report this to the police as criminal fraud and identity theft. That would likely result in criminal charges against your sister. Or you can handle it as a civil matter, demanding repayment without involving law enforcement immediately. Either way, you'll want to freeze your credit and dispute the fraudulent accounts. I left Marcus's office with a heavy heart and a clear plan. First, I placed a fraud alert and freeze on my credit reports. Then I contacted the credit card companies, the lender, and the bank that issued the line of credit to dispute the fraudulent accounts. They all promised to investigate, but warned that the process could take months. Next, I needed to confront my family. I decided to approach my parents first, without Emily present. I drove to their hotel the next day, trying to prepare myself emotionally for what would be one of the most difficult conversations of my life. They seemed surprised to see me when they opened the door. Ricardo, we were just about to call you, my mother said. We're having lunch with Emily before we head to the airport. Would you like to join us? Actually, I need to talk to you both. Now. It's important. Something in my tone must have alarmed them because they ushered me in immediately. I sat across from them in the small hotel room and placed Marcus's report on the bed between us. I know about the money, I said simply. All of it. The settlement, the loans, the credit cards, everything. My father's face darkened. What are you talking about? Emily stole my insurance settlement. She took out loans and credit cards in my name, and you two received $25,000 of my money from her. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. That's not true. Emily said that was from a bonus she received at work. It wasn't, I replied coldly. It was my money. Money meant to cover my medical bills and support me while I recovered from nearly being killed. My father stood up, his face flushed. This is ridiculous. Emily has been managing your finances because you haven't been in any condition to do it yourself. The doctors said your memory and judgment might be affected. My judgment is fine, I snapped, and my memory is clear enough to know when I'm being lied to. Emily didn't manage anything. She stole from me, committed identity theft, and apparently gave you a cut of the proceeds. How dare you, my mother gasped. We would never steal from you. I opened the report and showed them the bank transfer record, then explained this. $25,000 transferred to your account from the joint account where Emily deposited my settlement check. Money you never mentioned to me. They stared at the document in shock. Emily said this was to help with your recovery, my father finally said. She told us you were having trouble keeping track of your finances because of your head injury, so she was creating separate accounts for different purposes. This money was supposedly for us to use when we came to help with your care. And you didn't think to ask me about any of this? Or wonder why I was struggling to pay my medical bills if there was all this money available? My mother started crying. We thought Emily was taking care of everything. She's always been so responsible with money. Well, she wasn't this time, I said. She's been stealing from me to cover her gambling debts and maintain her lifestyle. And you two, whether knowingly or not, helped her do it. My father sank back onto the bed. This can't be right. There must be some explanation. There is, I replied. Emily has a gambling addiction. She needed money, and I was an easy target while I was vulnerable. A gambling addiction? My mother looked stunned. That's impossible. I showed them Marcus's findings about the casino withdrawals and online gambling transactions. They read in silence, their faces growing paler by the moment. What are you going to do? My father finally asked. I haven't decided yet, I said truthfully. But I want you both to know that I'm not confused. My memory isn't faulty, and I'm not going to let this go. Emily committed crimes against me, and you two failed me completely by choosing to believe her over me without question. I stood up to leave. I suggest you cancel your lunch with Emily, and I want that $25,000 returned to me by the end of the week. As I reached the door, my mother called out, Ricardo, please, family matters should stay private. We can work this out without involving outsiders. I turned back to look at them, these people who had raised me but had so easily dismissed me when it mattered most. This stopped being a private family matter when Emily committed fraud. Now it's a legal matter. And as for family, I'm not sure what that word means anymore. I walked out, leaving them to process the truth they had been so determined to ignore. After confronting my parents, I knew the next step would be even more difficult. I needed to face Emily directly. Rather than alerting her immediately, I spent the next week gathering more evidence and consulting with an attorney who specialized in financial fraud cases. The attorney, Sarah Jeffries, was blunt about my options. Your case against your sister is very strong. The identity theft and fraud are clear-cut, but you need to decide what outcome you want. Do you want her punished, or do you want your money back? Sometimes you can't have both. I thought about it carefully. Despite everything, Emily was still my sister. I didn't want to see her in prison if there was another way to recover my losses. I want my money back first, I decided. But I also want her to face consequences and get help for her gambling problem. Sarah nodded. Then we'll structure our approach accordingly. I suggest a family meeting where we lay out the evidence and your demands. Sometimes the shock of being exposed is enough to bring someone to the negotiating table. I arranged the meeting for Sunday dinner at my apartment. I told Emily I wanted to thank her for all her help during my recovery, ensuring she would attend. I also invited my parents, who had been calling me constantly since our confrontation, pleading for a chance to make things right. Sarah would arrive halfway through dinner, giving me time to try one last time to get my family to admit the truth without legal intervention. Sunday arrived. My parents showed up first, looking anxious and subdued. Emily arrived 20 minutes later, breezing in with a bottle of expensive wine and acting as if nothing was wrong. You look great, Ricardo, she exclaimed, hugging me. Almost back to your old self. I returned the hug stiffly. Thanks. I'm feeling much better now. Clear-headed. We made awkward small talk through the appetizer course. My parents kept exchanging nervous glances, while Emily chatted about her business and clients. I let her talk, noticing how she casually mentioned her successful year and recent vacation to Cabo San Lucas, all paid for with my money, no doubt. As I served the main course, I decided to set the trap. So, Emily, I said casually, I've been going through my finances recently, trying to get organized after everything that happened. Her smile faltered slightly. Oh? I thought we agreed I would handle that for now. Actually, I've been meaning to ask you about the insurance settlement, the one for $175,000 that was issued in February. The color drained from her face. What are you talking about? I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, my voice hardening. The settlement check you deposited into a joint account you opened without my knowledge, then systematically drained for your own use. Emily glanced at our parents, who were staring at their plates. Mom? Dad? Do you hear this? His memory issues are worse than we thought. Ricardo, we discussed this. There hasn't been any settlement yet. Stop lying, I said quietly. I have copies of the endorsed check, bank statements, transfer records, everything. I also know about the loans and credit cards you took out in my name. Emily's facade cracked. You've been snooping through my personal affairs? How dare you? How dare I? I laughed bitterly. You stole nearly $300,000 from me while I was recovering from nearly being killed. And you're upset that I investigated? It's not what you think, she stammered. I was just trying to protect you from yourself. You've always been careless with money, and with your brain injury, I was worried you'd waste the settlement. By spending it on a Tesla and a kitchen renovation? I asked sarcastically. Or was it the gambling debts you were more concerned about? Emily went completely still. What did you say? I know about the gambling, Emily. The casino visits, the online poker sites, all of it. The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. I excused myself to let Sarah in, introducing her to my stunned family as my attorney. I've asked Miss Jeffries to join us because this is no longer just a family matter, I explained. We're here to discuss the terms under which I won't file criminal charges against Emily for fraud and identity theft. Criminal charges? My father exploded. This is insane. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family, I replied coldly. And family doesn't dismiss a member's concerns as memory issues to cover up theft. Sarah opened her briefcase and removed several folders. I have here documented evidence of multiple felonies committed by Emily Alvarez against Ricardo Alvarez, including identity theft, fraud, forgery, and conversion of funds. The total amount in question is $283,422.17. She slid copies of her summary across the table to each person. If Ricardo chooses to report these crimes to law enforcement, Miss Alvarez would likely face significant jail time. However, my client is willing to discuss alternative arrangements. Emily was shaking as she looked through the documents. This is a misunderstanding, she whispered. I was borrowing the money. I was going to pay it all back. When? I demanded. After you gambled away everything I had? After you ruined my credit and left me drowning in medical bills? To everyone's shock, Emily burst into tears. Not the manipulative tears she had used throughout our childhood to get her way, but deep, body-shaking sobs. I messed up, she finally admitted. I messed up so badly. It started small, just a few online poker games to relieve stress. Then I started winning, and it felt amazing. By the time I started losing, I was already hooked. I needed money to keep playing, to win back what I'd lost. So you took it from me, I said flatly. She nodded miserably. When you had the accident, I saw an opportunity. You were out of it for so long, and the settlement was so large. I convinced myself I would just borrow some of it, win it back quickly, and return it before you even knew it was gone. And the loans? The credit cards? I kept losing. The debts to the online casinos got bigger. Some of the people I owed money to started threatening me. I panicked. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I know it's unforgivable. I don't expect you to understand. My mother reached for Emily's hand. Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us you were in trouble? We would have helped you. You did help her, I said pointedly. With my money. The $25,000 she sent you came directly from my settlement. My parents had the grace to look ashamed. We didn't know, my father insisted. Emily told us it was a bonus from her business, and that she wanted to share it with us to help with your recovery costs. Emily nodded. That part's true. I did tell them that. They didn't know it was your money, Ricardo. I wasn't entirely convinced, but I decided to focus on the main issue. It doesn't really matter now. What matters is how we move forward. Sarah took over, explaining the terms I was offering. Emily would have to enter a treatment program for gambling addiction, sell her luxury assets to begin repaying me, and sign a legally binding repayment agreement for the remaining balance. In return, I would not file criminal charges as long as she complied with all terms. And if I refuse? Emily asked weakly. Sarah's expression hardened. Then my client will file a police report tomorrow morning. We already have an appointment scheduled with the Financial Crimes Unit. Given the evidence we've collected, you would likely be arrested within days. I leaned forward. I don't want you in jail, Emily. I want you to get help, and I want my money back. But make no mistake, if you don't agree to these terms, I will press charges. Emily looked at our parents, perhaps hoping for them to intervene. But they remained silent, finally understanding the gravity of what she had done. Okay, she finally whispered. I'll do whatever you ask. I'm so sorry, Ricardo. I never meant for it to go this far. Intentions don't matter much at this point, I replied. Actions do. As Sarah began explaining the details of the agreement Emily would need to sign, I excused myself to get some air. Standing on my small balcony, I felt no satisfaction in my sister's breakdown or my parents' shame. There was only a profound sadness for the family bonds that had been so easily broken by greed and deception. When I returned, Sarah had already drawn up a preliminary agreement, which Emily signed with trembling hands. This is just the beginning, I told my sister, as she prepared to leave. You have a lot to make up for, not just financially. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I know, and I will, somehow, I promise. After they all left, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the evidence of my family's betrayal. The victory felt hollow. I had exposed the truth and would hopefully recover much of what was taken from me. But the trust I had lost could never be repaid. The days following the confrontation were eerily quiet. My parents returned to Arizona without saying goodbye. Emily signed all the legal agreements Sarah prepared, then seemed to disappear from my life. I focused on my physical therapy and gradually increasing my work hours, trying to rebuild my life piece by piece. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Emily called. Her voice sounded small and unfamiliar on the phone. Ricardo, I need to talk to you. In person. It's important. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near my apartment. When I arrived, I barely recognized my sister. The polished, confident woman was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, and she wore no makeup. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down across from her. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. What do you want, Emily? I asked, not unkindly but keeping my guard up. She took a deep breath. I need to tell you everything, the whole truth. You deserve that much. Over the next hour, Emily laid bare the full extent of her gambling addiction. It had started 3 years ago after a client introduced her to online poker. What began as occasional entertainment quickly escalated into an obsession. She won at first, enough to make her believe she had a special talent for it. By the time the losses began, she was already hooked. I lost my entire savings within 6 months, she admitted. Then I started taking out loans, maxing out credit cards. I was sure the next big win would fix everything. When I had my accident, she saw it as both a tragedy and an opportunity. With me incapacitated, she had access to my financial information and the perfect cover to commit fraud. I told myself you would never miss the money, because you'd never know about it, she said, her voice breaking. The insurance company was dragging its feet, and when the settlement finally came through, I convinced myself I was entitled to some of it for taking care of you. The story grew darker. Some of my money had indeed gone to her gambling debts, but not all of it. She had borrowed money from people connected to illegal gambling operations, people who didn't send late notices when payments were missed. They threatened me, she whispered. Said they would hurt me or someone I cared about if I didn't pay. That's where a big chunk of your settlement went, paying off those people. I felt sick. Why didn't you go to the police? She laughed bitterly. And admit I'd been gambling illegally? Besides, these aren't people you can hide from by filing a police report. And our parents? I asked. How much did they really know? Emily sighed. They suspected something was wrong with me. They knew I was having financial problems, but not the extent of it. When I sent them the money from your settlement, I told them it was a bonus I wanted to share, because they'd been so worried about you. They accepted it without too many questions. But they knew about the settlement, I pressed. They knew I was supposed to receive money. I told them your memory issues were worse than you let on, and that the doctors advised me to handle your finances until you were fully recovered. They believed me because they wanted to. It was easier than facing the truth. I sat back, processing everything. Why are you telling me this now? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Because I'm scared. The treatment program starts next week, and I'm terrified of what will happen when I have to face everything I've done without the escape of gambling. And because, she hesitated, because I want whatever slim chance there might be to someday fix what I broke between us. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to comfort my sister, to tell her everything would be okay. But another part, the part still raw from betrayal, couldn't offer forgiveness yet. I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were, I said honestly. But I hope the treatment helps you. She nodded, wiping away tears. I understand. Thank you for listening. As I walked home from that meeting, I felt the weight of everything Emily had revealed. The situation was even worse than I had imagined, with dangerous people involved and my parents deeper in the deception than they had admitted. I wondered if any relationship could survive such profound breaches of trust. That evening, my phone rang again. This time it was my father. "Your mother and I have been talking," he said without preamble. "We want to help make this right." "How?" I asked skeptically. "We're selling the vacation condo in Sedona," he said. "It should bring enough to cover the $25,000 Emily gave us, plus some extra to help with your ongoing medical expenses." I was stunned. My parents loved that condo. They had been talking about retiring there for years. "You don't have to do that," I said automatically. "Yes, we do," he insisted. "We failed you, son. We believed what we wanted to believe because it was easier than asking hard questions. That money was never ours, and we need to make it right." His words were a small balm to my wounded heart, but trust wouldn't be rebuilt overnight. "I appreciate that, Dad. It means a lot. There's something else," he continued. "We've been talking to Emily about her gambling. She's agreed to let us help her through this process, but she's scared about these people she borrowed money from. Do you think your lawyer friend could help with that situation?" I had been thinking the same thing. "I'll ask Sarah. She might have contacts in law enforcement who could help without putting Emily at risk." For the first time in weeks, I felt a small glimmer of hope that perhaps, with time and effort, something of my family relationships could be salvaged. The next day, I received an unexpected call from Allison. We had been giving each other space since the confrontation, as she processed her own role in the situation. She had known something was wrong with Emily's story, but had kept quiet out of misplaced loyalty. "Can we meet?" she asked tentatively. "There are things I need to say to you in person." We met at our favorite park, sitting on a bench overlooking the duck pond, where we had spent countless hours before my accident. "I should have told you," she began. "Emily asked me not to worry you with financial details while you were recovering, but I knew something wasn't right. I found some papers in your apartment with withdrawals you didn't make. But when I asked Emily about it, she convinced me it was part of managing your medical expenses." "Why didn't you tell me once I was better?" I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. Allison's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was protecting you. The doctors kept saying stress could set back your recovery. And Emily was so convincing about handling everything. By the time I realized how wrong things were, it felt too late to speak up without admitting I'd kept things from you." I wanted to be angry with her, but I could see the genuine remorse in her face. She had made a mistake in judgment. But unlike my family, she was taking full responsibility without excuses. "I understand why you did it," I said finally. "But relationships can't work without honesty, even when the truth is difficult." "I know," she whispered, "and I'll understand if this means the end for us. But I want you to know how sorry I am, and that I still love you. I hope someday you might be able to trust me again." I took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth that had comforted me through months of recovery. "I don't know what the future holds for us, Allison. I need time to rebuild my life and figure out who I can trust. But I'm not closing the door completely." She squeezed my hand, hope flickering in her eyes. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." As we sat there watching the ducks glide across the water, I realized my world was slowly reorienting itself. The betrayals had shattered my sense of security and trust, but from those broken pieces, perhaps something stronger could eventually be built. Later that week, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. James Henderson, my mentor from work, stopped by with dinner and a concerned expression. "You've been through hell," he said bluntly as we sat down to eat. The firm has been worried about you, especially after hearing about the financial mess your sister created. I was surprised. How did you know about that? James gave a small smile. Boston is a small town in certain circles. Sarah Jeffries and I serve on the same nonprofit board. She didn't give me details, but mentioned you were dealing with a family financial situation on top of your recovery. For some reason, having someone completely outside my family know about what happened was oddly comforting. James had been a mentor to me since I joined the firm 5 years ago. His straightforward approach to problems had always been something I admired. It's been challenging, I admitted. Physically, I'm getting better, but discovering my own sister stole from me while I was vulnerable has been harder to recover from. James nodded thoughtfully. Family betrayals cut the deepest. But you're handling it the right way. From what I can tell, setting boundaries, seeking legal help, not just sweeping it under the rug. Sometimes I wonder if I should have just let it go, I confessed. My parents think I'm being too harsh, that family matters should stay private. That's nonsense, James said firmly. What your sister did wasn't a family squabble, it was criminal fraud. You can still love someone while holding them accountable for their actions. In fact, sometimes that's the only way to truly help them. His words resonated deeply. I had been struggling with guilt over pursuing legal action against Emily, wondering if I was being vindictive rather than principled. I have a friend who might be able to help with your situation, James continued. Caroline Marshall. She's an attorney who specializes in cases involving financial fraud within families. She understands the unique challenges when the person who harmed you is someone you still care about. I already have Sarah working on my case, I pointed out. Sarah is excellent for the legal recovery aspects, James agreed. But Caroline's focus is on rebuilding family relationships after fraud, if that's something you want to pursue eventually. She works with both victims and perpetrators to establish healthy boundaries and communication. I considered his offer. I'm not sure if my family relationships can be saved at this point. That's for you to decide, James said. But having resources available doesn't hurt. Think about it. As James was leaving, he turned back with one last piece of advice. Ricardo, remember that recovering from betrayal takes as much strength as recovering from physical injuries, maybe more. Don't rush it. And don't let anyone tell you how you should feel or when you should forgive. His support gave me a renewed sense of determination. While my family had failed me, others in my life were stepping up in unexpected ways. Perhaps that was the silver lining in this dark cloud, discovering who truly had my best interests at heart. 2 months after the confrontation with Emily, the legal process was well underway. Sarah had filed the necessary paperwork to dispute the fraudulent accounts and loans. But the credit card companies and lenders were dragging their feet on resolving the issues. Emily had completed the first phase of her gambling addiction treatment program and had sold her Tesla, using the proceeds as the first payment toward her debt to me. However, just when it seemed things were moving in the right direction, a new complication arose. Emily hired her own attorney, a slick corporate lawyer named Victor Brennan, who sent Sarah a letter disputing some of the terms of our agreement. He's claiming that given your memory issues from the accident, you might have verbally authorized Emily to use the funds, and simply forgotten about it, Sarah explained during our meeting. It's a weak argument legally, but it signals she might be preparing to fight rather than comply with the full agreement. My heart sank. I thought she was taking responsibility. She seemed genuinely remorseful when she explained everything to me. Sarah gave me a sympathetic look. Unfortunately, that's common in these situations. Once people face the full consequences of their actions, they often backslide and try to minimize their culpability. What do we do now? I asked. We stay the course, Sarah said firmly. We have solid evidence of fraud that would stand up in any court. But I think we need to show Emily and her attorney that we're serious about pursuing criminal charges if necessary. She suggested we schedule a meeting with the district attorney's office to discuss filing criminal charges and make sure Emily knew about it. The hope was that the threat of prosecution would bring her back to the negotiating table with a more cooperative attitude. I agreed, though the prospect of criminal proceedings against my sister filled me with dread. Still, I reminded myself of James's words about accountability being a form of love sometimes. The meeting with the Assistant District Attorney, Marcia Johnson, was sobering. After reviewing our evidence, she was blunt about Emily's situation. If you choose to file charges, Miss Alvarez would be looking at multiple felony counts, she explained. Given the amount of money involved and the calculated nature of the fraud, she could face significant prison time, potentially 5 to 7 years. Her status as an accountant would be an aggravating factor, as she used specialized knowledge to commit these crimes. I felt physically ill at the thought of Emily in prison for that long. Despite everything, she was still my sister. Is there any alternative approach that would still hold her accountable but focus more on restitution? I asked. Marcia considered this. We do have a first-time offender program that includes probation, community service, and mandatory counseling, along with restitution. But it would require her to plead guilty to at least some of the charges, and she would still have a felony record, which would likely end her accounting career. As we left the meeting, Sarah sensed my conflict. You don't have to decide anything today, she assured me. Let's see how Emily and her attorney respond when they learn about this meeting. The response came faster than expected. The next morning, I received a call from my parents. What are you doing, Ricardo? My mother demanded, her voice shaking with anger. Emily said you're trying to send her to prison. Is destroying your sister's life going to make you feel better? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that they didn't have all the facts. Mom, Emily hired an attorney who's trying to back out of our agreement. She's the one who changed course, not me. She's terrified. My mother continued. She made mistakes, terrible ones, but she's still your sister. Family protects family, Ricardo. We don't throw each other to the wolves. Is that what you think I'm doing? I asked quietly. Because from where I stand, I was the one thrown to the wolves while all of you looked the other way. There was a pause on the line. Then my father's voice came on. Son, we understand you're angry, and you have every right to be. But there must be a better way to resolve this than involving the criminal justice system. I'm open to suggestions, I replied, as long as they include Emily taking full responsibility and making complete restitution. We'll talk to her, my father promised. Just please, don't file any criminal charges yet. Give us a chance to work this out as a family. I agreed to wait, though I made it clear that my patience had limits. After hanging up, I wondered if I was being manipulated again. My family had a pattern of closing ranks against outside scrutiny, often at the expense of true accountability. Later that day, Emily called. Gone was the defensive tone I'd expected after hearing about her new attorney. Instead, she sounded defeated and scared. Victor told me what could happen if you press charges, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never thought it would go this far. I can't go to prison, Ricardo. I can't. Then why hire an attorney to dispute our agreement? I asked. She sighed. I panicked. The reality of losing my business, my house, everything I've built hit me all at once. Victor said he could help me keep some of it, maybe negotiate better terms. But he didn't tell me his approach would involve questioning your memory and competence. And you didn't think to ask? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. I wasn't thinking clearly, she admitted. I'm still not. The treatment program has been brutal, forcing me to face everything I've done without the escape of gambling. Some days, I can barely function with the shame. Despite my resolve to remain firm, I felt a twinge of compassion. Addiction was a disease, one that had clearly driven my sister to desperate acts she might never have committed otherwise. What do you want, Emily? Another chance? She said simply. I'll fire Victor today. I'll sign whatever agreement you and Sarah think is fair. I'll sell my house, liquidate my business, whatever it takes. Just please don't press charges. I wanted to believe her, but trust had been shattered too completely for simple promises to repair it. I need more than words this time, I told her. I need actions that prove you're serious about making amends. We agreed to meet the following day, with both our attorneys present. I called Sarah immediately to update her on the developments. This is good, she said cautiously. But let's not celebrate yet. We need to craft an agreement that has real teeth, with clear consequences if she fails to comply. And I want proof that she's fired Victor before we meet. The meeting was tense, but productive. Emily arrived with a new attorney, Andrea Wong, who specialized in addiction recovery cases. She had also brought financial statements for all her accounts and assets, and a notarized letter from her treatment program confirming her active participation. My client understands the gravity of her actions, Andrea began. She's prepared to make full restitution, even if it means starting over financially. The new agreement we hammered out was comprehensive. Emily would sell her house and personal luxury items, with proceeds going directly to me. Liquidate her business assets in an orderly fashion to maximize their value. Continue the gambling addiction treatment program for a minimum of 1 year. Submit to financial monitoring by an independent trustee for 5 years. Make monthly restitution payments for any remaining balance after liquidating assets. Perform 500 hours of community service related to gambling addiction awareness. Agree that any violation of these terms would result in immediate criminal charges. It was a harsh agreement, one that would essentially reset Emily's life to zero. But it was also her only path to avoiding prison and eventually rebuilding some kind of future. As she signed the documents, I saw tears falling onto the paper. "I'll make this right somehow," she whispered. More to herself than to me. After the meeting, Sarah pulled me aside. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me. "This agreement has the teeth we needed while still giving your sister a chance to redeem herself." "I hope so," I said. "I don't want to destroy her life. I just want justice and my money back." "This gives you the best chance at both," Sarah said. "Now we need to focus on clearing your credit and recovering from the remaining lenders." With Emily's cooperation, the process of disputing the fraudulent accounts accelerated. Sarah used Emily's signed confession and the evidence from our investigation to pressure the credit card companies and lenders to forgive the debts and clear my credit report. Some complied quickly, while others required more persuasion and the threat of regulatory complaints. 3 weeks after signing the new agreement, Emily sold her house. The real estate market had been good to her. The property sold for $40,000 more than she had paid for it 4 years earlier. Combined with the proceeds from selling her car and other luxury items, we recovered nearly $130,000 immediately. The liquidation of her business was more complicated. Many of her clients had already left after hearing rumors of her troubles, but the firm still had value in its customer lists, systems, and reputation. A competitor offered to buy it for $65,000, a fraction of what it would have been worth a year earlier, but still a significant amount toward her debt. By the 4-month mark after our agreement, Emily had repaid almost $200,000 of what she had taken. The remaining balance would come from her future earnings, once she found employment that didn't involve financial management. Throughout this process, my parents had remained in Arizona, maintaining contact through occasional phone calls. They seemed to have finally accepted the reality of Emily's actions and the necessity of the consequences she faced. My father called one evening with news. "We've sold the condo," he said. "The money should be in your account by the end of the week." "Dad, I told you that wasn't necessary," I protested. "Emily's making good progress with the repayments." "It's necessary to us," he replied firmly. "We were blind when we should have been vigilant. We took money that was rightfully yours. This is about restoring our own integrity, as much as it is about helping you." His words touched me deeply. Perhaps there was hope for healing our family relationships after all. Though it would take time and continued efforts on all sides, as the legal processes wound down, I found myself in a strangely calm period of reflection. The anger that had driven me during the investigation and initial legal battles had subsided, replaced by a more nuanced understanding of what had happened and why. I began to consider James's suggestion about meeting with Caroline Marshall, the attorney who specialized in rebuilding family relationships after fraud. I had lost much through this ordeal, but I had also gained valuable insights about myself and those around me. I had discovered my own strength and resilience, proven that I could advocate for myself effectively, and learned painful but necessary lessons about trust and vigilance. The question now was whether these lessons would leave me bitter and isolated, or wiser and more discerning in my relationships going forward. 1 year after the fateful family dinner that started it all, I stood at the window of my new apartment, watching the spring rain nourish the budding trees below. So much had changed in those 12 months, both externally and within myself. The legal battles were largely resolved. Through Emily's asset liquidation and my parents' contribution, I had recovered approximately $250,000 of the stolen funds. Emily was faithfully making monthly payments on the remaining balance, working as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit organization helping people with addiction issues. She had completed her gambling addiction treatment program and was now attending regular support group meetings. My own recovery had progressed remarkably. I no longer needed a cane to walk, though my left leg still ached during cold or rainy weather. The memory issues had improved significantly, with only occasional struggles recalling specific details around the time of the accident. I had returned to full-time work at my firm, where James had recommended me for a promotion to senior project manager. But the most significant healing had been emotional and relational. After much consideration, I had taken James's advice and contacted Caroline Marshall, the attorney specializing in rebuilding family relationships after fraud. Under her guidance, my family and I had begun the painstaking process of addressing the damage done and establishing new, healthier patterns of interaction. The process hadn't been easy. Our first facilitated family meeting was tense and tearful, with old resentments and fresh wounds surfacing repeatedly. Emily struggled to explain her actions without making excuses, while my parents had difficulty acknowledging their enabling behaviors. I found it challenging to express my hurt without reopening wounds that were just beginning to heal. Trust isn't rebuilt in grand gestures, Caroline had explained in one session. It's reconstructed slowly, brick by brick, through consistent actions over time. Those words became our family mantra. Each small promise kept, each honest conversation had, each boundary respected added another brick to the foundation we were cautiously rebuilding. My parents had moved temporarily to Boston to be closer during this process, renting a small apartment near Emily's new place. They attended family therapy sessions regularly and had started their own support group for parents of adult children with addiction issues. My father had taken early retirement from his engineering firm, using his newfound free time to volunteer at a financial literacy program for recovering addicts. My mother, always the family peacekeeper who avoided conflict at all costs, was learning to be more direct and honest in her communications. As for Emily, the transformation was profound. Stripped of her material possessions and professional status, she had been forced to confront the person she had become and make difficult changes. The sister who emerged from this crucible was humbler, more authentic, and genuinely remorseful. I never realized how much of my identity was wrapped up in appearances, she confessed during one of our monthly coffee meetings. The house, the car, the successful business, they were all just props in a performance I was putting on for everyone, including myself. While I wasn't ready to fully trust Emily with any financial matters, I had begun to appreciate this new version of my sister who no longer hid behind a perfect facade. Allison and I had also found our way back to each other, though not without significant effort. After several months of cautious friendship and many honest conversations, we had decided to try again. This time with a commitment to complete transparency. Even when the truth was uncomfortable. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. It was time for our family dinner, the first one I had hosted since the confrontation a year ago. I had spent the morning preparing my mother's recipe for pot roast, a family favorite that felt appropriate for this milestone occasion. Emily arrived first, bearing a homemade apple pie and a nervous smile. My parents followed shortly after, bringing a bottle of sparkling cider in lieu of wine, a thoughtful acknowledgement of Emily's recovery journey. Allison came last, having stopped to pick up a bouquet of fresh flowers for the table. As we gathered around the table, there was an initial awkwardness, everyone acutely aware of how different this dinner was from the last one we had shared. I decided to address it directly. A year ago, we sat around a table like this, but with secrets and lies between us, I said quietly. Today, I'm grateful that we're here with truth as our foundation, however painful that truth has been. My mother reached for my hand, tears in her eyes. We nearly lost you twice, Ricardo. Once in the accident, and then again, through our own failures. I'm so sorry for not being the parent you deserved when you needed us most. My father cleared his throat, emotions visible on his usually stoic face. I've learned more about family in this past year than in all my 62 years before it. True family isn't about protecting each other from consequences. It's about supporting each other through them. Emily looked down at her plate, then raised her eyes to meet mine directly. I know I can never fully repair the damage I caused, but I want you to know that I'm committed to trying, for as long as it takes. You deserved so much better from me as a sister." Allison squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. A year ago, I thought I had lost my family forever. The betrayal felt too deep to ever recover from. But what I've learned is that sometimes relationships don't just break, they transform. What we're building now isn't the same family we had before, but maybe it's a stronger one, built on hard-earned wisdom rather than unexamined assumptions. We raised our glasses in a toast to new beginnings, the simple gesture symbolizing how far we had come and the journey still ahead. After dinner, as Emily and I washed dishes side by side, she asked the question I knew had been on her mind. "Do you think you'll ever be able to fully forgive me?" I considered this carefully before answering. I think forgiveness isn't a single decision, but a process. Some days I feel I've forgiven completely. Other days, the hurt resurfaces. What I can say is that I choose to keep moving toward forgiveness, even when it's difficult. She nodded, accepting this complex truth. That's more than I have any right to expect. Thank you for giving me the chance to earn back a place in your life. Later, as my family prepared to leave, Emily handed me a sealed envelope. "It's this month's payment," she explained. "Plus, a little extra, from a freelance project I completed last week." I accepted it with a nod, appreciating both the financial restitution and the symbolic acknowledgement of her ongoing commitment to making amends. After everyone had gone, Allison helped me clear the remaining dishes. "How are you feeling?" she asked, studying my face. "Surprisingly good," I admitted. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined sitting at a table with my family without anger consuming me. "Progress, I guess," she smiled. "Major progress. You've handled this whole situation with more grace than most people could have managed." I thought about that as we finished cleaning up. The past year had taught me that strength comes in many forms. It takes strength to fight for justice when wronged, but also strength to leave room for redemption. It requires courage to establish firm boundaries, but equal courage to gradually lower them when appropriate. True resilience isn't just about surviving trauma, but about growing through it. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from James. "How did the dinner go?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I replied. "Not perfect, but genuine. That's all anyone can ask for," he said. "Listen, the reason I'm calling is that the firm is putting together a team for a major new project in Chicago. It would involve relocating for at least a year, possibly permanently if things go well. I recommended you to head the architectural engineering component." I was stunned. This was a significant opportunity, one that would advance my career substantially. But it would also mean leaving Boston just as my family relationships were beginning to heal. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course," James replied. "They need an answer by the end of next week. For what it's worth, I think you'd be perfect for it." After hanging up, I sat on my balcony, contemplating this unexpected fork in the road. A year ago, I might have jumped at the chance to leave everything behind and start fresh. Now, the decision was more nuanced. I called Caroline Marshall for guidance. "This is exactly the kind of complex choice that tests our growth," she said when I explained the situation. "The question isn't whether staying or going is objectively right, but whether your decision comes from a place of healing or avoidance." Her words resonated deeply. Was I considering staying out of obligation, or genuine desire to continue rebuilding these relationships? Was I thinking about leaving to escape lingering pain, or to pursue authentic opportunities for growth? Over the next week, I had honest conversations with everyone involved. My parents assured me they would support whatever decision I made, even offering to visit Chicago regularly if I relocated. Emily acknowledged that while she would miss our monthly meetings, she understood this was a significant professional opportunity. Allison, whose freelance graphic design work could be done from anywhere, said she would consider moving with me if our relationship continued to strengthen. In the end, I decided to accept the Chicago position, but with modifications. I negotiated to spend the first 3 months commuting weekly, while maintaining my apartment in Boston, giving everyone time to adjust to the transition. I also committed to returning monthly for our family therapy sessions during the first year. The day before I left for my first week in Chicago, I met Emily for coffee. She seemed nervous, fidgeting with her cup more than usual. "I have something for you," she said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside was a cashier's check for $35,000, along with documentation from a small inheritance she had received from our great-aunt. "I want you to have all of it," she explained. "It won't cover everything I took, but it's another step." I was touched by the gesture, especially knowing she could have easily kept this inheritance secret. "Thank you. This means a lot. There's something else," she said, pulling another document from her bag. "I've been working with a financial counselor from my support group. We've created a more aggressive repayment plan that would cover the remaining balance within 3 years instead of 5. I reviewed the document, impressed by her initiative and commitment. Are you sure you can manage these payment amounts? I don't want you putting yourself in financial jeopardy again." She smiled sadly. "I've learned the hard way what real financial jeopardy looks like, and it's not living on a tight budget. It's lying and stealing from the people who trust you. I'd rather eat ramen noodles for 3 years than spend another day knowing I haven't made things right with you." As we parted, we hugged for the first time since before the confrontation. It wasn't the easy, thoughtless embrace of siblings who take their connection for granted, but the careful, intentional hug of two people who understood both the fragility and resilience of family bonds. On the flight to Chicago the next day, I reflected on everything that had transpired since that dinner a year ago. I had lost my sense of security and unconditional trust in my family, but I had gained something perhaps more valuable: the knowledge that I could survive betrayal and still choose connection over bitterness. I had learned to establish boundaries without building walls, to seek justice without vengeance, and to allow for redemption without naivete. The painful journey had transformed me from someone who passively accepted others' definitions of family loyalty into someone who actively created relationships based on genuine respect and accountability. I had discovered that sometimes the deepest betrayals can, if we allow them, lead to the most profound growth. As the plane descended toward my new temporary home, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The road ahead would have its challenges, but I was facing it with hard-earned wisdom and a clearer understanding of both myself and the complex, imperfect people who made up my family. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most painful experiences. In my case, it took nearly losing everything to discover what truly mattered and the strength I never knew I possessed. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone after it was broken? If you have, you know it's one of the most challenging emotional journeys we can face. If you found this story meaningful, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who might be going through similar struggles with family trust issues. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about how you've handled betrayal in your own life. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings some comfort to know that even after the deepest betrayals, healing is possible.